Welcome back to the Bill and Doug Show, picking the semifinals. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Thursday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Ole Miss versus Miami. That's a 6 versus 10. Friday, 7:30 Eastern. Indiana, Oregon. That's a 1 versus a 5. Landis will start with Ole Miss and Miami. Is this awesome? I like it's good, right? It's different. It's a 6 and a 10. An 8 won the national championship last year. Like these are not teams that would have even had a chance. Now they have both won 2 games in unexpected fashion, knocking off 2 blue bloods of the sport, and Ohio State and Georgia. Definitely a different flavor.
Yeah, I think it's fun. I guess like Miami preseason had a little bit of buzz, and then certainly after beating Notre Dame, kind of elevated itself, I think, into the conversation for everybody. But then they sort of fell off the radar. So for them to get back to this position, I think is pretty impressive. And then for Ole Miss, I think to kind of navigate a very strange season to get to this point too is sort of equally impressive. So I realize these aren't the 2 sexiest teams or sexiest brands in college football, though certainly Miami has a history. I think this is probably what the sport wanted, right, when it expanded the playoff. So here we are, 2 sort of, at least not modern blue bloods. Miami, like maybe at a time was competing for a spot in the national championship.
I wonder what the sport wanted. Like they wanted to provide opportunity, but did they really want opportunity to be in the top 4?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Well, they got two new money semifinals, so whether or not they wanted it, they got it.
Please enjoy your time in the playoff, but lose in the first or second round, and then we can get back to Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Notre Dame, figuring this thing out, Texas, right? That kind of thing. And that's
don't people love like George Mason making the Final Four? Weren't people excited about that?
I always think in the college basketball tournament, you hit a ceiling with the underdogs. Like you want the underdog to knock off. You love the 16, 15, 14, 13 winning that initial game. But then at some point it's like, oh, okay, can we have like the good teams play each other now? I think you like the underdog making the Sweet 16. Sometimes I wonder if you're actually excited about them making the Final Four. So
what if it's all underdogs? Because that's not a direct comparison to what we have here, but it's not like, because sometimes you get that and then they just run into whatever Duke and get their doors blown off. Right? Duke's not in the Final Four this year.
I think you want good players and exciting things. And so
unless Indiana,
it's one of those things. If Steph Curry's on your underdog, then great. Like I think you want guys to connect to. You maybe want guys that are a preview of something to come. And that's the thing about this, that there's a lot of guys on these 4 teams that we're going to be seeing. Fernando Mendoza and Dante Moore might be the first 2 picks in the draft, right? So this is not Ohio State, Notre Dame, Alabama, Georgia, but this is a lot of talent. Trinidad Chambliss might be in people's lives, right? Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor are going to be in people's lives. Keontae Scott's going to play in the NFL, right? That Quan Lacey's going to play in the NFL. So like I think that's an interesting part of it. It is one of those, you look at so this first game, it's in the Fiesta Bowl on Thursday. Ole Miss, Miami. Miami is favored by 3.5. The total is 52.5. In the Brian Fremeau Index, FEI, Miami is 6. In the SP Plus from Bill Connolly, Miami is 8. FEI, Ole Miss is 11. SP Plus, Ole Miss is 5. So those 2 statistical ratings have them actually flipped in terms of who's the better team. SP Plus still has some lingering, I think, recruiting stuff in there, maybe like a talent quotient. This is a little bit, Bill, I think coming in to the playoff, we sort of, or at least when we got to the final 8, it was pretty clear there were 2, I think, weaknesses among the final 8 teams. The other 6 teams were pretty balanced, but relatively speaking. But it was the Texas Tech offense, which showed up because they got shut out. They were the worst unit in the final 8. Texas Tech offense. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And then the Ole Miss defense. This game a little bit is that the Miami offense is the weaker part of the Hurricanes, and the Ole Miss defense is the weaker part. By FEI, Miami offense 15, Miami defense 5, Ole Miss offense 7, Ole Miss defense 44. So is it too simplistic to say this is a showdown of, can the Miami defense stop Trinidad Chambliss and Quan Lacey on the Ole Miss offense?
Yeah, that's kind of what it feels like. Which like raises some interesting questions, right? Because I think I don't know, whatever. If you were to look at like the recruiting pedigrees of both those sides of the ball, I'm sure Miami has an advantage, but there's some things stylistically with Ole Miss's offense. Number one among them being like the pace they play with, that I think could present some problems for Miami if they're not able to get them off the field quickly, right? I thought we saw in the Cotton Bowl against Ohio State that the Miami's defensive line got a little tired, like kind of in the middle of that game, because they don't take Bain and Mesidor off the field.
Right.
They were a little bit of tackle, but they don't take the ends off the field. And I think, you know, when you're a defensive lineman who doesn't come off the field, you do have to sort of find your spots to catch your breath when you're playing. And I think in those moments against Ohio State was able to move the ball a little bit, and Ohio State plays slow. So like if the pace is really humming for Ole Miss, I think that creates some interesting matchup questions here, and then add sort of Trinidad Chambliss's escapability on top of that. And I think you could sort of easily say, well, the matchup favors Miami, and I think it probably does, but there are a couple things about Ole Miss that could make this interesting.
I think in a lot of ways, and we just did a show for our Substack subscribers. If you want to go find us on Substack, where we write about Ohio State, we talk about Ohio State, Bill and Doug, OSU.substack.com. We just did a 2-hour show where I tried on a shirt from China, but we also talked about the Ohio State-Miami game for 95 minutes and rewatching that game and breaking down that game. And there were some parts of that game that what Miami is and what Miami does were a bad matchup for Ohio State. That here's this really good Ohio State defense, and if you're like this high-flying offense, they're going to do some stuff and disguise some coverages and give you different looks and try to slow you down. Miami and Carson Beck were like, that's fine. We'll just take a 3-step drop and throw a 7-yard out. You and your fancy defense have a good time. We're limited anyway. Like, well, what do you want us to do? We don't really have anybody who can stretch the field. We're going to dink and dunk. And so, like, congratulations on your scheme, Matt Patricia. It doesn't matter. And then also, Ohio State's offensive line and a quarterback who doesn't scramble. It's like, okay, well, now Miami started that game off getting after the quarterback a little bit. Ole Miss feels like the opposite of that. That I actually feel like the things that Miami did that were an issue for Ohio State, Ole Miss is the opposite of that. That Ole Miss is like, we don't really stop anybody that much. So it's like, we're not some great defense that like, if you we're ready to give up points. We don't have a defensive identity that you're going to prepare for, and then dink and dunk and move your way down the field. Because what I think actually would be more dangerous against Ole Miss is like a really good high flying offense. If this was Ohio State and trying to defend Jeremiah Smith and trying to defend Carnell Tate and trying to defend Julian Sand with maybe without getting after the passer the same way Miami does, I think maybe Ole Miss's defense would be in trouble, right? But Ole Miss is not afraid of this Miami offense, I think, because I think Miami is just going to try and dink and dunk anybody. So I think that's a better matchup for Ole Miss. And then Miami defensively is going to get after the quarterback. And guess what? Trinidad Chambliss is going to run away from you. According to PFF, he is the highest rated quarterback among Power 4 quarterbacks right now against pressure. And he can run, but also he had 0 scramble yards, according to PFF, against Georgia because he scrambled to throw and he scrambled to make big plays to save them at the end of the game. So whereas Julian Sand's not a scrambler, so when that pressure came, he kind of had trouble getting away from it sometimes. So I just think Ole Miss is so different than Ohio State that Miami was difficult for Ohio State. I wonder how difficult what Miami does is going to be for Ole Miss, who, frankly, no offense, plays like a bunch of lunatics.
Which is hard to account for, right?
Yes.
I do think, yeah. I think like Ohio State, like is what you're going to get. It's not that it's easy to stop, but I don't think you're expecting to get okey doked, right? Like you don't know what you're going to get from this unpredictable band of Ole Miss rebels. I was looking at, as you were talking to the PFF offensive line pass blocking efficiency. Ohio State, which had a heck of a time trying to block Miami, is 49th. Now that includes the game against Miami that didn't go well, but still I think they were like low 30s before that game. Ole Miss is 5th.
Okay.
Like I don't know, like I can pretend to be an expert on Ole Miss's offensive line, but will they be able to protect Chambliss maybe even slightly more then Ohio State was able to protect Julian Sayin. And then Chambliss's pressure to sack rate, which is how often did you actually get sacked when you are pressured, is great. It's 13.9%, which is among the best rates in the country. And I think the best rate of any of the quarterbacks left in the playoff. I know there are only 4. So matchups matter. And I do think there are some things here that can push you toward Ole Miss, or at the very least, like this being, and it's a close spread. It's 3.5. It's not like Miami's favored by a bunch, but to this being like actually a pretty even matchup, even if on paper, like not like player by player may not point you in that direction.
Ole Miss wants a shootout, right? Is that fair to say? They just played a game in the 30s against Georgia.
All their games again, yeah, they won a high scoring game. Yeah.
Can Miami get in a shootout?
That's what I don't. I think no. Like, and that's going to be I think the biggest part of this game is like whose style wins out.
Right.
If Ole Miss can turn it into a track meet, is Miami equipped to do that? And if Miami can, get off the field on defense, which it does at a pretty good clip, and run the ball, which it might be able to, because Ole Miss's run defense is not great, then they're just going to make it a plodding, low possession game. That is not what Ole Miss wants to play.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I mean, so let's just be realistic about something here. I ain't picking the SEC. So don't bet your house on what old French Vanilli's bringing to the table here. But there are parts of this, and when we did our quarterback draft, all I remember is that I picked him but I can't remember if we picked him 4th or 5th. Trinidad Chambliss. Is Trinidad Chambliss the most important player left in the playoff? I would say yes.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
That if Trinidad Chambliss, who just threw Ole Miss on his back at the end against Georgia, does that, then I don't know. Then I don't know.
Yeah.
That guy is the utmost playmaker. And the thing about that Ole Miss Georgia game was that Gunnar Stockton, who was also a lunatic, and in the best sense of they're football lunatics, in the best sense of the word, they are playmaking quarterbacks. That's not Carson Beck. And if you can speed up Carson Beck or put pressure on him, not literal pressure with your defensive front, but scoring pressure, perception pressure of like, okay, Trinidad Chambliss just did some crazy stuff and led a touchdown drive. What do you got, Carson Beck?
Mm-hmm.
I think Carson Beck's going to throw picks.
Yeah.
So I don't like that for Miami. And if Akeem Mesidor and Ruben Bain are in the Ole Miss backfield the way they were against Ohio State, I don't think Trinidad Chambliss is going to take some of the sacks that Julian Sayin took, whether they were Julian Sayin's fault or not. He didn't escape pressure. It's not his game. Trinidad Chambliss, his whole game is escaping pressure. And the idea that in a game like this, Akeem Mesidor or Ruben Bain can smoke their dude, and the end result of that play is a 29-yard gain for Ole Miss instead of a sack, that's how games are flipped. And Ohio State didn't do that once. Was there a single play where a Miami defensive or a pass rusher smoked an Ohio State guy and it turned into a really good play for Ohio State? I don't remember one. We just watched the whole game and talked about it.
If a Miami defensive player smoked an offensive player of Ohio State, he was getting the sack.
Yeah. So, don't you expect that's going to happen in this game? At least once or twice? Chambliss will get away?
Yeah. I definitely think he will. And I also think on the flip side of that, Ole Miss now has the benefit of having seen Carson Beck scramble a little bit against Ohio. That was the best thing he did against Ohio State, was scramble. Yep. So maybe they'll have a better plan for that than Ohio State did, because Ohio State didn't really adjust to that until kind of the second to last possession.
Everybody
would you pick Ole Miss if everything about this game was the same when Ole Miss was in the Big 12? Would you pick Ole Miss?
1,000%.
Okay.
And I almost feel like, because I want to do a show this week. I almost feel like I could craft a scenario where Ole Miss wins the national championship and it's still a black mark for the SEC, because they're so un-SEC and they're coachless. And the idea that Nick Saban gave Lane Kiffin the advice to go to LSU and abandon Ole Miss, and then Ole Miss wins the national championship, and that haunts Lane Kiffin and proves that Nick Saban gives terrible advice for the rest of their lives. That's the most acceptable SEC national championship that you could hope for, right? Mm-hmm. That it is a disaster for everybody involved, other than congratulations to the Ole Miss players and current coaches, half of whom are still working at two places right now. The world thought that the playmaking, program carrying, transformational transfer among SEC quarterbacks this season was Diego Pavia, and it was Trinidad Chambliss.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't vote for Diego Pavia for the Heisman, but I don't even Trinidad Chambliss certainly did not finish in the top 10. I don't know maybe you got a third place vote from somebody. Would it be so bad if we were waiting to vote for the Heisman, and if Ole Miss wins the national championship, Trinidad Chambliss won the Heisman? Would that be so offensive to people? That all you're going to do is reward the best player on the national champion. Okay, Diego Pavia finished second and then lost to Iowa. Everyone feel great about that right now? Everyone flying high. And then guess what? If we get Trinidad, we thought the Heisman
Chambliss did finish in the top 10. He was 8th.
He was 8th. All right. Well, then he could have grabbed some momentum. So the guy who finished 8th might lead his team to the national championship. We thought the Big Ten championship game was for the Heisman. Julian Sand versus Fernando Mendoza. Fernando Mendoza won. Would it be so offensive if the national championship game was for the Heisman? Fernando Mendoza versus Trinidad Chambliss, if that's how it worked out? Would everyone be so offended by that? And guess what? Maybe Fernando Mendoza would still win. Maybe Fernando Mendoza could lose in the semis and still absolutely 1,000% deserve the Heisman, get a lot of votes. Great. But like Trinidad, why are we doing this?
Yeah,
I don't want to make Diego Pavia mad. So that's fair. I don't want him to yell at people. Like, how dare you suggest that we should be voting for Trinidad Chambliss? But Diego Pavia walked with his middle fingers extended so Trinidad Chambliss could run.
I do think I think it's a conversation worth having what we do at the Heisman, but we should also have a postseason award if we're not going to have the playoff factor into the Heisman.
Yeah.
So that Chambliss can win that if he leads Ole Miss to a national title. Can I present a theory to you?
Please do.
So I've been waiting for this weird staff dynamic with Ole Miss to matter. The fact that Ole Miss's entire offensive staff is going to LSU, and Lane Kiffin pretty clearly wants them to stop coaching Ole Miss and come to Baton Rouge, and people are flying back and forth between the two places to recruit for LSU and get a game plan together for Ole Miss. Ole Miss's first 2 games were against teams that it had previously played. Now, Tulane wasn't going to be much of a threat, but the cake was baked for Tulane and Georgia. I don't think there had to be much game planning involved there. And this is all new. And I think that might matter a lot.
Great point. Makes me feel better about not picking an SEC team here. Well said. It's a lose-lose situation. And you're either picking a former Georgia quarterback or you're picking an actual SEC team. So it's a lose-lose. The one thing is Miami deserves to be here, right? The team that people thought wasn't going to get in at all to beat Texas A&M, who was undefeated through 11 games in the SEC, and then to beat Ohio State as the defending national champion, a team that made the Big Ten title game and was undefeated through the regular season. Miami deserves to be here. They have won their way here. Mm-hmm. Ole Miss is a benefactor of SEC midness, right? That bracket, that 3-team bracket, was going to produce a semifinalist. That it was Tulane, Georgia, and Ole Miss, and one of them had to be here. And so, congratulations to Ole Miss, but maybe they're also frauds, because I think Georgia in some ways is a fraud, right? So there's just some fraudulence all over the place, but also there's no fraudulence with Trinidad Chambliss. So he's the guy that that makes it hard for me to get away from Ole Miss, right? Because quarterback matchup, ask 100 scouts. There's nobody would take Carson Beck, would they? Who's taking Carson Beck? Somebody who's stuck in 18 months ago when people thought Carson Beck was going to. Can I just talk about the idea that NFL talent evaluators are idiots, by the way? My God. Remember we were getting Carson Beck shoved down our throats and Garrett Nussmeier? Nobody knows nothing. Who wouldn't take Trinidad Chambliss here?
No, I think everybody would. Yeah.
I'm picking Miami 18-17 because I just can't do it. 18-17, that's 6 field goals for Miami. That's Trinidad Chambliss running backwards on the last play of the game and throwing a pass into the end zone that is tipped by 9 people and falls to the turf as he falls to the ground and looks to the heavens and raises his arms and asks for an extra year of eligibility. So like I mean it kind of. But if I was betting my house, if I was making a money line pick for my house, I'd probably pick Ole Miss. But I guess I'm also taking Ole Miss with the points. So
you are.
I'm taking Ole Miss plus a 3.5. So that's distasteful enough.
I feel like everything we've discussed makes it think we should pick Ole Miss. I'm also picking Miami. I do. Trinidad Chambliss is only pressured on like 17% of his dropbacks against Georgia. I think that number will be much because Georgia's pass rush sucks. Yeah, but Georgia's pass rush sucks, which we talked about coming into the playoff. Miami's doesn't. So I think he'll be under much more pressure against Miami, and he still might make plays, but I actually think Miami will get to him in a way that Georgia wasn't able to. Okay. And I do kind of think the weird coaching stuff kind of comes home to roost here for Ole Miss as well. And I think like with the way that Miami can run it and how physical they are in the lines of scrimmage, I do think they will dictate the kind of the terms of the game. So I'm going to pick Miami 27-21.
They have a chance, and that was the best thing. The most surprising thing, the best thing I think they did against Ohio State was get some of that stuff going in the run game and get some nice second level blocks, do some stuff on the interior, right? Move some people, and they have some offensive linemen who could do that. And I don't know. And Ole Miss's defense is not great, so I don't know if they're going to hold up for that. So all right, those are our picks. We're both picking Miami. Second game is on Friday, 7:30 in the Peach Bowl in Atlanta. Indiana versus Oregon. It's a rematch. Indiana won in Autzen Stadium at Oregon 30-20 on October 11th. Indiana also favored by 3.5. So we have 2 3.5-point lines here. 47.5 is the total. These are 2 excellent balanced teams. FEI, Brian Fremeau, Indiana's 1, Oregon is 2. Indiana is 3rd in both offense and defense. Oregon is 2nd in offense and 4th in defense. SP Plus, Bill Connolly, Indiana 1, Oregon 2. Indiana 3rd in offense, 2nd in defense. Oregon 7th in offense, 3rd in defense. These are 2 more complete teams than what we talked about in the first semifinal. They've been there all year. Indiana hasn't lost. Oregon's only lost to Indiana. A couple injuries that do matter in this game. Stephen Daly on the defensive line for Indiana is out. That has been the case in the playoff. He got hurt celebrating the Big Ten championship win over Ohio State. And then Jordan Davison, who's part of the running back trio for Oregon, is also out on the injury report for this game. And it's like the Oregon run game really intrigues me here, Bill. They've been running it pretty healthily much of the year. Their backs against Washington in the last game of the regular season, only 32 carries for 90 yards, 2.8. Again, against Texas Tech, which again invested all their money in the defensive line. The Oregon running backs were 31 carries for 86 yards, also 2.8. In the first game against Indiana, Oregon's running backs were 20 carries for 100 yards. And I'm not doing the overall rushing totals. I'm only doing what the running backs did to take out the sacks and take out the QB run and any other weird stuff. Without Jordan Davison, they'll run it with Noah Whittington and De'Aaron Hill. They just still have guys who can do it. But if Oregon can't run it, I think they might be in trouble. But also, I think maybe they can, even though Davidson's out. Because Davidson averages like 10, 12 carries a game. He's not like they're missing 25 carries here. Whittington will be okay, and De'Aaron Hill will just step up his role.
Yeah, Oregon's offensive line I thought played pretty well against Texas Tech too. So I don't know. I think they'll be able to run it because it's been like by committee all year, right? So I don't you hope to have Davidson, or you hope you could have him if you're Oregon, but it's not like you're suddenly pulling a guy out of the lineup who had 25 touches a game. So he's a good player, but I think they'll find a way around it. I wonder, like, he's not a huge runner, but like, can you run Dante Moore a little more to try to account for that? Maybe. Or get some of these receivers involved in the run game on like sweeps and stuff like that. There are ways to get your run game going sort of around that unfortunate injury. And I think Indiana's defense is very good. Teams like have run it on them a little, not like for entire games, but like when teams have moved the ball on Indiana's defense, it has come via the run. And I like, if you take out the sacks from the first game against Oregon, I thought Oregon ran it okay against Indiana too. So, and like this is the second time seeing this defense. So I think Oregon's run game is still like fairly bankable in this game, even with the injury.
Everybody's on the Curt Cignetti train now, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's nobody left. I'm following NFL people who are talking about why isn't every NFL team with an opening interviewing Curt Cignetti, right? If there's one guy in this sport right now who can stand up to Curt Cignetti and Curt Cignetti's ferocity and Curt Cignetti's just like I think what he imbues his team with, right? All those things. The attitude that he's going to bring to this game. Is it not Dan Lanning?
I think it's Dan Lanning. Yeah.
So I'm going to smoke one here just to celebrate the fact that this is here, right? That we've reached this point, and that although Ohio State has stumbled, the Big Ten champion is here. The Big Ten champion from last year has reached this point, and these are two incredibly worthy semifinalists that certainly I think neither of us are surprised to see here. I think even I think people gave up on Oregon a little bit in October when they lost at home to Indiana. I think in part because people did not realize at that point how good Indiana was. But I will go back to the thing that I've said too many times now, which is this angry Oregon idea that I think Oregon in some ways feel like its national championship was taken away a year ago. And so they might be owed one, right? That they did this a year ago and then ran into a buzzsaw in Ohio State. And Curt Cignetti even said it. It's hard to beat a good team twice. I think that can be overblown, but I think Dan Lanning, there's no doubt Dan Lanning is going to use that. And most of the time with Indiana and Curt Cignetti, like they have sort of this chip on a shoulder thing that they use against you. And I think Oregon's chip is as big.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think so, yeah.
If you can match the motivational advantage of what Curt Cignetti brings, I think you're like halfway home. Now you got to scheme it up, which they do incredibly well. You got to coach it up, which they do incredibly well. They got a playmaker at quarterback, awesome. So does Oregon. They got playmakers at receiver. Now that they're healthy, so does Oregon, right? I mean, these teams, they got a real defensive identity. Both teams have that. I think these teams are like very evenly matched in a lot of ways. And Oregon is mad because they lost.
Yeah, I think that matters. And I think like it was interesting last year, right? When Oregon lost to Ohio State, or excuse me, when Oregon beat Ohio State in the regular season, and then Ohio State showed up in the Rose Bowl, like playing a pretty drastically different style than what they had played the first time they played Oregon. And I don't know that Oregon was ready for that. And there was like some allusion to this I was watching a little bit of the joint press conference that Curt Cignetti and Dan Lanning were doing as it pertains to Oregon's defense. Like Oregon, I think, retooled some stuff defensively after the Indiana game. And Curt Cignetti said, like, yeah, I'm in my early stages watching it, but I see some different stuff. Like I wonder like just like how much different what Oregon might present to Indiana, like how much different that could be. Of course, Indiana has the chance to do the same thing, but also Indiana hasn't lost, right? They haven't had that sort of that moment of reckoning to think to themselves, like, what we're doing is like not exactly working. Do we need to change anything? And Oregon has had that, courtesy of Indiana. So I wonder if there's any advantage for Oregon that way. If there's a thing here that's different, a thing there that's different, that might spark something in what I expect to be like an incredibly competitive and close game. And like pretty physical game. There are just a couple of things like adding up that makes me think like maybe in the key moments Oregon might have the edge.
Breaking news. I'm sorry to interrupt the show. Is it okay if I interrupt with breaking news?
Mm-hmm.
apparently Bowling Green kicker Jackson Cleather has committed to Northwestern.
Oh, no.
So, tough loss for Ohio State.
Who I don't think was ever really interested in
recruiting.
Only we were interested in.
So, like the game of like, who's this year's Indiana? It's one round later, but Indiana is last year's Oregon, and Oregon is last year's Ohio State. Mm-hmm. One is the undefeated number one team, the last undefeated team standing, and one is the very good team that lost to them during the regular season and now is getting a second shot at them. And I don't want to go too far with it, but if I think a lot of other things are pretty even, and I think they are, I think it might be enough to sway me, Bill. It might be enough to sway me.
I think it is for me. And the other, like I thought the defensive line, the Stephen Daly injury was going to matter for Indiana against Alabama. I just failed to take into account that Alabama stinks.
I could have told you
Oregon doesn't stink. And if you go like, Daly had a nice game against Oregon. Kellen Wyatt had a nice game. He got hurt in that game against Oregon for Indiana. So like that's two pretty key defensive pieces for the Hoosiers. One of whom they haven't had for like half the year, but that mattered a pretty significant amount the last time they played Oregon. That aren't going to be available in this game. And like I still believe in Indiana's defense. I think they're going to give Oregon a lot to handle, but Oregon's O-line is like significantly better than Alabama's, and I think if that was an edge for Indiana at the first time they played, and it was, I think with those two injuries, the edge might be back in Oregon's offensive line's favor in that matchup too.
And like everybody has come, there's nobody left who doesn't respect Indiana. Everybody has come around. It took a while for some people. It might have taken beating Alabama because there were a few ding dongs out there who like picked Alabama to win that game. Indiana was never going to lose that game. I'm taking Oregon, and you and I both, when we did our bracket beforehand, and we are not beholden to it because it's what you think at one point in time before anything starts, and then games are played, teams change, things change, and you're allowed to change your mind. But you and I both had Ohio State versus Oregon in the national championship game. Obviously, we were wrong on one part. I will let that influence me slightly because I guess what I would say is I'm not sure that anything has happened with Oregon or Indiana that if I thought it then would change my mind now. Indiana did what I thought it would do in the quarterfinal. Oregon has done what I thought it would do. And I think Oregon in some ways played an imperfect game against Texas Tech, against an imperfect team, but also like kept grinding and kept banging the drum, and like they got stopped on a fourth down or they have to do this. Like they kept at it and shut somebody out in the playoff, no matter how limited they are. And that mattered to me. So I'm going to take Oregon 23-21 over Indiana.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on all that. I'm picking Oregon too, 28-27. Give me a 1-point banger.
Okay. I would love to give you a 1-point banger there, Bill. That would be fantastic.
It could be like low scoring. Couldn't it be like 17-14? Could you see that happening? I think, yeah. So
the total for Indiana, Oregon is 47.5. So I'm under that and you're over that. For Miami, Ole Miss, the total is 52.5, and we are both pretty comfortably under that. I would imagine that French Vanilli is putting $2-3 bets on the two unders in these games.
Yeah.
So,
I would have. Yeah, I think that's right. I think I would do the same thing, but I've been wrong about that in the past. I think we were watching the Rose Bowl in our hotel in Dallas as Indiana was running up the score on Alabama, and I said to you, I'm pretty sure I said verbatim during our preview that I don't think Indiana's going to kill them. That was unfathomable for me. They just destroyed them. They treated them like an FCS team.
They ended Bama. Guess what we're going to do? We're going to do live. Do we talk about this? We're doing live post-game shows after both semifinals. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, I saw it on the budget. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll be here Thursday as soon as Miami and Ole Miss is over. talking about that game. And then we will be here Friday as soon as Indiana and Oregon is over talking about that game. And we have a handle on both these games because I don't know if back in the day people knew we used to do a Northern show. We'd like to hear on the Bill and Doug show. We still look at college football from a Northern viewpoint. So we have a handle on the Hoosiers and the Ducks. And then we know a lot about Miami because we're at the game where Miami beat Ohio State. We just rewatched that game. We have a handle on that. And then nobody has a handle on Ole Miss. Coachless Ole Miss, led by a backup quarterback from Division II. Nobody has a handle on them. But I'll tell you what, I think Trinidad Chambliss is pretty good. So like if you're getting any more analysis on Ole Miss other than their coachless and their Division II quarterback transfer who is intended to be here as a backup has saved their bacon, and actually they might be better without Lane Kiffin, there's nothing else to say there. That's the maximum analysis you can get anyway. So if that's what we're saying, everybody else is they're saying that and then you're just blowing smoke. They don't know what they're talking about.
We did learn what's the defensive lineman's name that we learned. We thought they were calling him Suntarian Perkins, and we thought it was Suntarine. He was a fruity drink. Yeah. Yeah, cousin of the tangerine. So congratulations to all those guys, and congratulations to all the players and coaches who have made the semifinal, which I do think we should call the Final Four. It's a big deal. I don't know. Do people call it the Final Four? I think we should call it the Final Four. In college basketball, you hang a banner for making the Final Four. This is quite an accomplishment. I think it means something. So yeah, what do they can call it the Football Four.
Oh, that's great.
Change it up a little bit because they call the hockey the Frozen Four.
Oh, the Football Four. God, this sport's a mess. They need us. All right, we'll be here post game for both those shows, talking about all kinds of stuff for Ohio State, the transfer portal, everything else happening around college football. You can find it here. We appreciate you guys for joining us. For now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was the Bill and Doug Show.